So here we are. If you don't know this gentleman, this is Ricou Browning. This is his lovely daughter, Renee. And I just wanted to start out, the one thing I wanted to mention, and I had my nephew do some homework for me. They're trying to find Guillermo del Toro, who did the movie Pan's Lab. That's The Shape of Water. Have you met him? Has he talked to you? I wonder if he's ever had a chance to talk to you.
Yes, he called me, and this is before he made the film. And he told me that he was trying to make a remake of The Creature with Universal, and they turned him down. So then he turned around and did The Face of Water.
So what I wanted to say is that here's this major movie that wins all these Oscars and critically acclaimed. It's all because of this one main image to Guillermo del Toro that wanted to follow up on that. Of you swimming underneath Julie Adams in the ballet sequence, which is probably one of the most iconic images in horror films of all time. And that we wouldn't have The Shape of Water if it wasn't for that work you did in that film.
Well, could be.
So anyway, obviously this is the famous creature from the Black Lagoon. And but there's a lot more to Ricou than there is, and he loves to hear. We're going to go to questions and answers. Questions early. If you guys have got some questions, because he loves to take questions from the audience. And we got a big creature fan here, Bill Bowen. He's everything I know from the creature, I want to know from him. But what I wanted to get into first was you did some uncredited work on 20,000 Leagues in the Sea, right? Yeah. What did you do on that film?
I was one of the Disney divers, and we worked for about 3 months on that show. Interesting thing is they shot the underwater scenes just like you would shoot topside, using cameras, cranes, tripods. They didn't have a free swimming camera.
Oh, at that time, yes.
There was a Navy diver there, Commander Fain, who had a free swimming camera. And they were all amazed to see him swim around with the camera. And they didn't change though. They shot the entire film just like you would shoot a topside with tripods and cranes. And unbelievable.
It's been a while since I've seen it. Can we spot you? Can you spot yourself when you watch it?
Yeah.
It's very obvious.
Yeah.
Let's back up a minute. You were first doing, your main thing was underwater shots. So that was your first big giant job career?
Well, I started diving at Wakala Springs as a lifeguard. And the gentleman who ran the springs, Newt Perry, was like a human fish. He was very good in the water. Well, he taught all us high school kids how to breathe from an air hose and do various things underwater. And so he was out of town, and he called me on the phone. He said, Ricou, there's some people coming from California to look at the springs for a movie. He said, I'm going to be out of town. Could you come and pick them up and take them to the springs? I said, sure. So I did. And while we were at the springs, they filmed the river and they filmed underwater. The cameraman said, would you mind swimming in front of the camera so I can get some perspective the size of a human to the fish, to the logs, grass, and whatever. I said, sure, so I did. And I took them back to the airport and they left. About a week later, I got a call from the general manager who has now returned. He said, they're trying to reach you on the phone. Can I give them your phone number and have them call you? They're interested in you working on the film. So I got a call, and it turned out to be Jack Arnold, who turned out to be the director of the film. And he said, Ricou, we like the way you swim. How would you like to be an underwater monster? I said, why not? So I went to California. We spent about 2 months trying to build a suit for the show. And they built one, and I looked more like a lizard than a monster. So no one liked the suit, so they turned it down, rejected it, and they started to make another suit. And they got a gentleman from Disney's film called Chris Mueller, and he and Jack Keevan, who was one of the makeup artists at Universal, got together, and they're the ones that designed the the suit that we actually wore. An interesting thing was I had a leotard on, and they were going to glue the pieces of the suit to my body and put it like a chest plate on, thigh pads and everything. And I'm standing up, and they put this chest plate on, they glued it, and I'm standing there, and it's getting hot. And the glue is setting up, and it's getting hotter. And I said, Jack, this is really getting hot. He said, oh, it'll be dry in a few minutes. I said, it's really getting hot. And I said, you either take it off or I want to tear it off. So they took it off. And I had a huge blister on my chest from the glue setting up. It caused heat. And I still have the scar from that. Anyway, they spent the next month building the suit that we originally used, and then movie Creature.
So that movie did pretty darn good, but you thought, well, actually, you did all three Creatures films, but you thought, oh, it's a job, it's a movie, come and go, and I'll be known for. And then later down the road, when you did different things, you thought you'd be known for some other things, and all of a sudden, this Creature, you didn't realize how big this Creature fandom would develop into where you're.
No, I had no idea, nor anyone else who worked on the film thought it would do anything but, be shown on the theater. You go home and it's over.
Right.
Well, I didn't hear anything about it for till 20 years. 20 years after the movie was made, I got a letter from a fan and asked me if they could get a picture. And I didn't have any pictures. So I said, no, you can't, because I don't have any pictures. But anyway, a friend of mine had a picture, and he gave it to me, so I had it duplicated. And I called this guy back, and I said, I've got a picture, so I sent it. And gradually, over that time until now, we've got about, I'd say, 300 to 400 pictures, different pictures of the Creature working with people underwater, playing around or whatever. And that's the ones we have at the show and are selling.
Yeah, be sure to go down to his booth if you haven't been down there. There's lots of cool stuff to look at.
He also had to pay to get in to see the movie afterwards.
So they call you back to the second one. They flew you up.
No.
They shot these down in Florida, the underwater sequences.
Yeah, but a funny story, the studios, as of today, they have no loyalty to anyone. And so I got a call from Jack Keevan. He said, Rico, we're making a second Creature movie. He said, well, we need you. I said, okay, do you want me to come to California and have the suit built, whatever? He said, no. He says, we're in St. Augustine, Florida, at Marineland Studios, and we're shooting. I said, well, I don't have a suit. He said, well, we hired a guy who was about 6'4", and he's in the suit, but he can't swim. I said, okay, I'll come down, but I said, I don't have the suit. He said, we'll cut it down to fit you. And sure enough, over a period of about 5 days, they cut his suit down to fit me, and I was able to work on the show.
So so I take it they got his seats shot when they were done, because they couldn't make the suit bigger again after they cut it down for you.
Well, the third film, they used a lot of stock footage, and they had one suit for me to use. And then we had a different head to use because the guy's gills were cut off.
Right.
In the third film. I didn't like the third film.
Now the second one, of course, I guess you know that's I guess I never wrote the film. Clint Eastwood is this Clint Eastwood's debut film. Did you realize that?
Well, Clint Eastwood worked on second Flipper feature, and he was in California, and I think it's the first movie he ever worked on. Well, I was in Florida shooting, so I never met him.
Yeah, it's an interesting little footnote that his first role is the Revenge of the Creature. So, another question I have would be for, so where, after you do these Creature films, you're back in Florida, where does Ivan, tell the audience Ivan Tours, who exactly is Ivan Tours?
Ivan Torres was a producer, of course, in Hollywood for a long time. And he made a lot of old features, and he made TV series. Well, I got to know him because we did a show called Seahawk. And I was working as publicity director, assistant publicity director at Silver Springs, Florida. And they came to the Springs to shoot. And while they were shooting, they needed someone to play a bad guy on the water fighting Lloyd Bridges, whose double was Courtney Brown. So they used me to fight him. But it turned out every time they had an underwater scene with a guy getting beat up, it was me getting beat up. And I enjoyed it because the money was good. And we shot for, I don't know, the first year at Sea Hunt and the second year of Sea Hunt at Silver Springs. And Ivan Torres was a producer, and he asked me, because he knew I'd worked on 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. He said, what is it like in Nassau? Could you tell me about it? I said, sure. He said, then never mind. He said, my wife and I'll go with you. We'll go to Nassau and look for places to shoot. So we went to Nassau, and we found, of course, multiple places to film. And I wrote a little sketch for him about what we could do there. And he said, okay, Ricou, we're going to form a company, move to Nassau, and we'll film Sea Hunt. We filmed Sea Hunt, we filmed Aquanauts, we filmed Malibu Run, and a lot of other films. But the main ones was like Thunderball, James Bond film, and Never Say Never Again, which is a James Bond film. And we worked on other films there for other people and other companies, and did portions of their film or whatever was dealing with underwater.
So Ivan, he really hooked up with you. He was settled in he was based in California, but got with you and said, hey, this is an interesting thing to do. Actually moved everything to Florida and hooked up with you to do become the go-to people for the underwater stuff.
Yes, but he formed a company, which we formed it in Nassau, called Underwater Studios.
So he moved there too?
No, he's in California.
Okay.
And I ran the studios in Florida and Nassau. While we were in Nassau, I remember excuse me, I'll start over. I remember when we were dealing with Ivan at Sea Hunt, my partner and I, who was Jack Cowden, a radio announcer, and turned out to be my brother-in-law, was a good writer. I wasn't a good writer, I was a thinker. And I thought of the idea of making a movie about a boy and a dolphin. And we wrote a book, small book, called Flipper. And so I went to New York for the last $200. And I went to 4 book places and offered them this as a book. And I only found one that seemed interested. So I went back home, but I never heard from him. So I called Ivan on the phone in California. I said, Ivan, will you do me a favor? When you say you're considering my book, Flipper, Boy and a Dolphin, for a movie. He said, yeah, okay. He said, but send me a copy. So I did, and I never heard from the book company. So I called him and I said, I've got a producer in Hollywood, Ivan Torres, is considering this as a feature movie, hoping that would get them off their feet and make the book. But I never heard from him. But then a couple of weeks later, I get a call from Ivan. He said, I got your story. I didn't read it, my wife did. And then she made me read it. He said, let's make a movie about a boy and a dolphin. And so he got the money from MGM, and we made the first Flipper feature, and then those thereafter.
And you trained all the dolphins.
Oh, we had to get a dolphin to play the part of Flipper. And we went to various aquariums Florida, California, and Atlanta and other places, and said, we need a dolphin to play the part of Flipper. Could we use one of your dolphins? And they said no. And I said, well, we need a dolphin. And they, at that time, no one ever swam in the water with a dolphin. They always were topside with fish, having to jump through a hook or do whatever. And we couldn't find an animal. Well, we were driving down in the Florida Keys. We heard about a guy named Milton Santini who captured dolphins for aquariums. And so we went to him and said, you know where we could get a dolphin we could use for a show? And he said, well, I don't know. He says, I've got one over in a pond over there, and I keep her there because when I catch wild dolphins for aquariums, I put them in there with her, and they see her eating cut up fish, so they begin to eat sooner. So we said, good. So we went over to the pond. There was a little dock sticking out. And I waded out in the water about waist deep. Ivan was up on the dock. And as I got in the water about waist deep, this animal, the dolphin, Mitzi was her name, swam around my back and stuck her head up under my arm. And I looked at Ivan and I said, we got Flipper. But anyway, I spent the next 2 months training Flipper to do what we needed for the dolphin show, for the Flipper show. And I used my son, who was about 9 at that time, to help work with her, because it was going to be about a boy and a dolphin. And I never trained a dolphin before, so I was training the dolphin, and the dolphin was training me. So I finally got it to retrieve balls, retrieve a rag, all different things. Well, my son was wearing a pair of cut-off jeans, and I got an idea. I said, Ricky, you go out in the water, and I'm going to send Flipper. I'll throw the ball over your head. You make a splash like you're the ball, and we'll see what she does. So he did, and she did. She swam over and grabbed one of the little loops in his jeans and started to pull him back to me to retrieve him. Well, he accidentally stuck his hand up and her dorsal fin went into it, and she swam in right to me. So I said, holy mackerel. I said, Ricky, you go all the way across the lake, which was about as far from here to the very end of this room. And I said, I'm going to throw the ball over your head. And when I do, jump in the water and see if you can hold on to her fin and bring her to me. Her bring you to me. So I threw the ball over his head. He jumped in the water, held on her fin, and he rode her all the way to me. So the cameraman who worked with us on that show, Lamar Bourne, was down there with me, and he had a little cabin up on a hill from where the pond was. As soon as Ricky started swimming all the way across to me, I said, Amar, get your camera and get your butt down here. He came down and filmed Ricky swimming, riding the dolphin. So I called Ivan, I said, Ivan, we got Flipper and we got tricks for the show. So we spent the next 3 months training the animal to do all the various things we needed in the show, and then we made the first Flipper feature.
Do anybody have any questions at this point? Anybody want to throw Ricou some questions? Billy, got anything?
Well, I know that Wikiwachi played a big role in your family, you and your family.
Duke Perry, who ran the hotel, had asked me to show the people around at the Springs, called me and said, Ricou, I've got an idea for a show, and I need some help. Would you go with me? And it was summertime, and I was out of school. So we drove down the highway, and we got down near this crossroad, and I looked over, he looked over to the right, and he said, there's the spring. And all it looked like was just a puddle of water and nothing else there. So we got out of the car and waded out in the water to where we saw the spring. It was beautiful, clear water. And so we spent the next year preparing it to do an underwater show. And built an underwater theater and had the girls from Florida State College for Women, which is now FSU, Florida State College for Women swim team to come down and be the first mermaids. And then they did the first show, and from there on, it's been a good show every year. The state bought it down, and the girls are still doing the mermaid show, but they had to all become wardens. So all the girls are Florida State wardens, and mermaids as well. And the show is still going on.
When did that start?
I don't remember.
It's been going on for a long time.
Oh, yeah, well, it's very long.
50s.
Yeah, I
Maybe
thought it was like
40s.
1949.
49,
Yeah,
okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Wow.
And your sister was actually one of the
My sister
original
was a
mermaids, right?
mermaid, and my daughter, my wife, was a mermaid. And they were there for a number of years working as mermaids.
Anybody else got questions? Yes.
Besides the creature, what's your favorite project you've actually worked on?
I think Thunderball, and the reason is I didn't have a budget. They say just go do a good job, and that's a very limited budget. So we spent the next 3 months shooting the underwater scenes for Thunderball. We didn't actually shoot for 3 months, but in preparation and whatever, we shot probably underwater for a month and a half. And not having a budget, it was great. And I was able to hire all the swim teams, diving clubs from Florida to come over to play the bad guys and some the good guys underwater. And it took a while to train them all, but we finally got them trained and we were able to shoot the show.
Tell them why they hired you to do that.
Oh yeah, that's a funny story. I was at Ivantor Studios, and I was at that time vice president of Ivantor Studios. So we got a call from Cubby from
Harry Saltzman. There was Broccoli and Saltzman. Saltzman and Broccoli.
Saltzman.
Anyway,
Kevin McClory.
he called me from Nassau, and he said, "Would you go to England and meet with them to talk to them about doing the underwater scenes?" And I said, "Sure." So I went to London and I met Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman. And it turns out they're both Chicago guys. And I couldn't believe it. And they both spoke perfect English, no English accent at all. And they said, "Well, why should we use you and your team to do the underwater scenes?" I said, "Well, it's very simple. We were considering Jacques Cousteau to do the underwater." And I said, "The reason is we're phonies. He's not. He does everything for real and we do everything phony." And they said, "Yeah, you're right." So we got the job.
Now, did you, the big battle sequence is yours, but did you work on the scene with Sean swimming underwater too with the girls? Or that was probably a stunt double too, probably. Did you ever, was Sean ever in the water? Sean Connery at Thunderball, or was it always a stunt double?
Oh no, we used the stunt double, Frank Cousins, for doubling him.
Yeah.
But we also used him.
Oh, you did Sean do a little?
Yeah. And in the first film, Thunderball, he was a pretty good swimmer and a fair diver. But we used the double more than we used him. But we did close-ups of him and doing various things. And we made a couple of mistakes. As an example, we had a piece of plexiglass and we let the sharks swim in, and there was a plexiglass between him and the shark, so the shark wouldn't get him. And the mistake was he put his hands up on the glass and you could tell that he's putting his hands on something. And another funny story was that there's a scene where he's swimming into this area where they're gonna jump in the water and go out, get aboard the ship. And he's swimming in the water and he doesn't have shoes on. And he swims up to the dock, gets out and runs, he's got shoes on. So there are crazy things like that.
I can only imagine what it was like at Nassau for that big a production to come in. And wasn't at the same time the Beatles were down there shooting Hell? Was there an overlap of?
The Beatles were there, yes.
Yes, I mean, some of it was just going crazy. All kinds of people coming out of the woodworks.
Yeah, we had a big party one night and the Beatles were there.
Oh, so you should get to meet them?
Oh, yeah, nice, very nice kids.
Oh, great.
And they weren't, that popular in the States yet,
Yeah.
but very popular in London, Nassau, and other places. And they were nice kids, and we enjoyed it.
Huh. That's because I knew that there was like some. I was reading somewhere along. This has been a while back where the competition between Sean Connery is almost as popular as the Beatles were. There was a more crowd just for Sean as there were for the Beatles down there in Nassau when they were down there shooting. So.
I guess.
So after Flipper, there's another show that came along, Gentle Ben, and you had some hand in that, didn't you?
Yes.
Tell us about that. How'd that come about?
Well, there was a book. I'm not sure what the title was. It may have been Gentle Ben, but it was about a Alaskan big bear. I forget what they call
Yeah, there's a certain name for it.
it. But we didn't use
Kodiak?
it.
Kodiak?
Kodiak. We didn't use it. We used just a brown bear, a black bear, and trained them. A funny story was bears are very strong, and the guys would spend time wrestling with them, and none of them could ever win. The bear would sit right on top of them. But the bears were tame, and every now and then they would get angry, and they had sticks with little electric tip probes on them, and they would poke the bear with the tip to make him stop doing something. And so we were shooting, and they were shooting up at the porch of the house where they lived, and the bear were trying to act ugly again, and so they were poking him with this stick. Ivan was on the set, and there were some newspaper people there. And they said, "What are they doing?" And he said, "They're tickling them with the tickle stick."
So that Ivan had his main thing was water stuff and animal stuff. He was really into animals, wasn't he?
Well, he got into animal stuff mainly with Flipper.
Flipper, that was the beginning of it.
And, and then he went beyond that. And I wasn't involved in the beginning of that, but he created shows,
Atari.
Doctor Across That Line.
The price went down on that.
Yeah, I wasn't involved with that
Right,
show.
but I'm sure your hands were full with the other things we were
You
doing.
worked on Caddyshack?
Oh, I don't know. I was going to get to that because what the heck do you do with those guys in Caddyshack?
I worked on Caddyshack.
Get in trouble?
It was a lot of fun.
I bet.
I did the second unit of Caddyshack, the explosions, the boat stuff, and whatever. And we're getting ready to shoot the scene with the boat, and all of the first unit crew, that's the director and some of the actors, went down below deck on this big boat we were on called a striker. And I got the boat going and started doing some shots, and I opened the door up to talk to the director and ask him about what he wanted somewhere. And I opened the gate up and smoke came boiling out, funny smelling smoke. And I said, "You want to?" He says, "Just close the door and do your thing." So we did the whole sequence of the boat chasing and jumping over boats and all kind of crazy stuff. And it was a great show to work on, a lot of fun. But the most interesting part of the show was Bill Murray. He had a very small part, but as time went on, he grew and made this part big. And it turned out he did more for the show than anybody else, and he created all the things he did. So he was great.
So he's in a swimming pool scene with a candy bar. Did you place the candy bar down at the bottom?
No, that's funny. We just shot portions of it underwater.
Yeah.
But a funny story was, there was a scene where they were hitting a golf ball. The golf ball was supposed to hit a bird and knock it off of them. Well, so I got a tame crow from a friend of mine who had lots of birds. And we put him up on the limb, and the prop guy made a little chute, and he took ping pong balls, and he would blow the ping pong balls toward the bird to knock him off the branch. Well, he kept trying, he wasn't getting enough, power behind it. So he put a little more power behind it. The bird was up there looking, and the ping pong ball stuck right on the end of the nose of the bird. The bird went like this, turned, and walked off. And we had dailies, every when the shows were shot, we'd go into the screening room to see what was shot the day before, the week before. And I was in the daily room, and we're sitting there, and the shot of the bird came on. And all you saw, of course, the bird sitting there, and this thing sticking on his nose, turn his head and walk away. And everyone went, wow. I said, Ricou, how did you do that? I said, I don't give my secrets.
And actually, you directed some films too, didn't you? You directed some films too.
Yeah.
I'm curious about this Mr. No Legs. That's an interesting, it's become kind of a cult classic, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. Just recently, two young men got the rights to the show from the ex-producer's wife, who wound up with the rights.
Okay.
Anyway, they're going to do a remake of it and add footage and take away footage. And they interviewed me for about a half hour, and they said to be back in touch, but I've never heard from them. So I don't know what they're going to do.
Hopefully there'll be a feature of you interview on that disc when it comes out.
But anyway, when we made the film,
It's Richard Jekyll's, I believe, right?
yeah, Richard Jekyll and John Agar, and I forget his name. But anyway, they're friends of mine, so we got them on the film. And towards the end of the film, the guy ran out of money. So I talked to the actors into staying an extra couple of days, and they did, and did a good job. But the funny part was they couldn't finish the film. So they said, we got another $3,000. We created a car race. We started racing the car, chasing the bad guy chasing the good guy, the bad guy chasing the good guy. And I think it's the longest car chase in the history of film, just to make the film long enough. Yeah, and it turned out fine.
I'm dying to see that film. It sounds really good. I'm a big fan of Richard Jekyll too.
Yeah.
Somebody did a good job. He's always a great character actor.
Oh, I was going to tell you a story about 20,000 Leagues.
Oh, please. I'd like to hear that.
We were shooting it, and we were getting paid, I don't know, $300 or $400 a week. And we found out the divers from California were getting paid $600 or $700 or $800 a week. And I had worked in films before, so I represented the Florida guys, myself and 3 other guys. And I went with them, and I met with the producer. And I said, look, we want to get the same pay they're getting. And he said, I don't know. I said, well, we're gonna get it. And so I left. Well, what they turned around and did, they went over and talked to all the Florida guys with me not being there. And they made a deal with them. And I was out. So I left the film. But the realistic story was the guy who headed up all the divers and made decisions was named Freddie Zindar. And this is years later. I'm working at Silver Springs, and this company comes in, they want to shoot underwater. And they love the springs, and I said, sure. Well, it turns out Freddie Zindar is the guy that's heading it up. I said, there's only one problem. If you're going to shoot here, Freddie Zindar's going to pay me $3,000. Sure enough, I got my $3,000. What comes around goes around.
Do you remember, have any memories about the 1969 film Hello down there? Because Richard Dreyfuss was here yesterday. Did you guys, I was wondering if you guys, he came over and said hi to you or anything.
Yeah, we became good friends.
Did you see him yesterday?
Yes, we
Okay,
came over.
Good.
Didn't take it though. He's a nice guy.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was one of the first films he ever made.
Yes, it was. Is there?
And he sang in the film. And they worked with the Dolphins a little bit. And they said they didn't do the shark footage, but they saw the shark footage.
Right.
So I wrote him a little note and I said, hello down there. I said, how have you been? We're one of these shows. And so hey, I didn't know you were here. So he came over and he said, how did you get those sharks to do what they did? I said, it wasn't easy.
But yeah, I mean, once he hit big with Jaws and Close Encounters, it's like any film fan, you go, well, what he did earlier on? And that's when I discovered Hello down there. I was like, oh, that's an interesting film.
Tell them who else was in Hello
There's a
down
lot of-
there.
there's-
Great cast.
Yeah.
Who else was in
Yeah.
Hello down there?
You remember the rest of the cast in that movie?
Tony Randall.
Yeah, it is. I didn't write it down.
And Janet Leigh.
Yeah.
Janet Leigh, a lot of good
But it's
actors.
really, it's a nice little, cool, interesting tidbit.
Good family show too.
Yeah, but 1969 Hello down there, so check it out if you get a chance to see it.
It's
So,
really
Yeah.
cute.
I don't know if it's on a streaming service or not, but early Richard Dreyfuss. He's always funny. He's always hyper in his early roles.
Every time my dad got an idea for a movie, he would bring the animal home, whether he made the movie or not. So we ended up with otters, skunk, peacocks, a sea lion that lived in the house, slept in the bed, a bear that wore diapers and suspenders, drank from a bottle. So living with him was really interesting. And he did make movies about some of them, but it
Do we get to
just,
see those at some point?
yeah, well, the one movie was called Salty. You wanna tell me about Salty?
Yeah.
That was the one about the sea lion.
I thought you said home movies. I'd like to see the home movies.
Yeah,
shot.
they're pretty funny.
Ah,
Anyway, we did a movie called Salty, and I had to have an animal to play the part of Salty. And I called a guy I knew in California, and I said, "Did you see about me getting a sea lion to play in a movie?" And he says, "No, but I think I can buy you a sea lion and ship it to you." I said, "Great." So I sent him the money, and sure enough, in a cage, he shipped me a little sea lion who was a baby and was on a bottle. And he had a bottle inside the cage. And it arrived, and I started feeding him with the bottle. And he was great. So I took him into my home. My son had just went into the Marine Corps. And his bathroom was vacant, and his bedroom was vacant. So the sea lion lived in there. And the sea lion would lay on the bed, go to sleep. And we trained her. We pulled a tray out from under the bed. And when she get ready to go to the bathroom, she threw her tail over the side of the bed. Go to the bathroom in the tray. Put her tail back on the bed. Very clean animal. something we didn't know, she would go into the shower and we turn it on, and she loved it. But when she would sit over the drain, and when she sat over the drain, the bathroom would flood, the bedroom would flood, the hallway would flood, the living room got dirty, and all of a sudden you hear this, sliding all the way in the water. So we had to keep her out of the shower.
And take her to the beach.
But I was in the kitchen feeding her and training her to eat cut fish. And she was eating it and doing well. But she was always begging real loud when she wanted food. Well, while I was feeding her, the phone rang. And I picked it up. Some person said, asked if my wife was there. And I said, no, but I'm busy right now. In the meantime, under all of this is, and so I said, call me back another time. And I hung up. Well, she thought I was killing my wife. She called the police. And while I was in the kitchen feeding the animal, I see this police car. We had a big home with a circle drive around the house. This police car goes by. And he comes by a second time. So what the heck? So I put the pail I was feeding the animal, went to the door, opened it up, and I saw the cop. I said, "There's something wrong?" He says, "No, is there something wrong?" Sure enough, here comes the sea lion. I said, "Go away."
Well, but we went to the beach, or did you take the sea lion to the beach?
Yeah, we take her, after we had her for quite a while, and she got bigger, we take her to the beach, and she would go out swimming in the ocean, whatever, and come back. But we had trouble, once she came back to the shore, getting her from there to the car. So we trained her that when we go out in the water, like waist deep, she would crawl up on your back, and you could walk out of the water with her on your shoulders and take her all the way to the car. And it worked out beautifully. But pretty soon she got pretty heavy. So we had to be careful about it.
And she'd suck on a pacifier to stick her head out the window when you're driving. There were a lot of car accidents.
And then in the movie too, you had Clint and Rance Howard, right? You had a good connection with the Howard family, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Rance Howard was a super guy. He trained both his children, of course,
Right.
to be actors, and they did very well. And he got very little credit for what he did. Rance Howard, as you know, Ron Howard now is one of the best producers, our biggest producers in Hollywood. His other son, Clint, was a little boy in my film, and I used him again in another film. And he comes to Florida frequently, but he doesn't get as much work as his brother.
Yeah. But I think Ron usually, he gets a scene out of one of his brother's
Yeah, he
movies. I think
does.
Ron always puts him in a movie, in a scene somewhere, and always
I'll tell you a story about Ron.
Sure.
He was going to make a movie with the girl in the water.
Cocoon? Was it Cocoon?
Splash.
Oh, Splash.
Yeah.
Splash.
Yeah, he
Yes,
did make a
Daryl
movie, but
Daryl
Splash.
Hannah.
I guess he was going to try to do Splash.
I'm making a movie called Splash. And at that time, I had already worked with Clint and with Rance, and I met Ron, of course, as a young man. And so they got ready to shoot the film, and they had a lot of water work to do. And they said, "Well, why don't you hire Ricou?" And so he had this meeting, and Jordan Klein, a friend of mine, was there. He said, "No, he'd want to direct." I said, "Yeah, right."
So what about, did you ever, with Lady in Cement, did you go pal around with Frank Sinatra a little bit?
He was a nice guy. When you got ready to shoot, you better be ready to shoot.
He's on,
He's ready to shoot. Anyway, we shot the underwater scenes for Lady in Cement, and I had to hire a woman to play the part. And so at the studio, I had agents pick out some women and bring them in. And we had to sit there and watch them in the nude. And none of them looked too groovy that we saw. And this one girl came in, and she was great. I mean, looked great, every part of her. And I said, we'll use her. Well, she couldn't dive. So we had to train her to dive. So I had a guy, Courtney Brown, a friend of mine, diver, and the guy that double Lloyd Bridges, by the way, to teach her how to dive. And he did. And she learned how to dive pretty good. And then we had to teach her how to breathe from an air hose. Because when she's down underwater, you had to give her air and take it away from her, hold her breath while we're shooting the scene. And
She's a lady. She's literally a lady in cement. The title. Down
Yes.
Underwater. This is a Frank Sinatra, Tony Rome thriller detective film, and so they find this lady down the water.
yeah, she's got her feet in cement. It looks like she has her feet in. She puts her feet in and locks them in. And she could release herself if she had to. But she's there, and we had this eel grass to have the eel grass come up in the right places so you're not looking where you shouldn't look.
You know, so this has been our rating.
But anyway, it worked out fine. And the girl was excellent. And we didn't know at the time, she brought her boyfriend over. And they both were heavy pot smokers. And they, in their room, they just about kicked him out of the hotel.
Wow.
But anyway, it worked out fine.
She just went to the Caddyshack set. What about and I also noticed you did Lucky Lady. That's the Liza Minnelli and Gene Hackman.
Yeah, that-
big one. The bird.
Bird.
Yeah, bird.
We shot in Mexico, Guaymas, and we had to shoot a lot of ships fighting each other. And once again, this guy I told you about, Freddie Zimmer, they had to pay me the money. He was on that film, and I got to be friends with him then, and he's a pretty good guy. But anyway, we're making the film, we have 40 boats fighting 40 boats. And I had Mexican captains in most of all the boats. And we had to rehearse scenes where the two boats come together and they start having a battle. And the director said, I don't want you to use a helicopter. He said, I don't want any helicopter shots. So what I did was I got up on the side of the little mountain and the plane would fly over, right over the camera, and we'd quick pan, and he'd dive down into the battle scene. So it looked like a helicopter shot, but it wasn't a helicopter shot. And we'd have the two sides fighting each other, and this went on for about a month. And we got some of the biggest battle scenes you ever saw, if you ever saw the film, of the ships fighting each other.
No.
Liza Minnelli and Gene Hackman and Bird had to do a scene at night in the water right off the beach. And the water was freezing, the air was cold, and the two guys were just freezing to death. Liza Minnelli jumped right in, made a fool out of them, so they had to do it. Anyway, she was a great gal, and worked out very well.
I have a really obscure film we worked on, The Heavenly Kid. You working on that one?
Yeah, Heavenly Kid.
What did you do on that?
I was second unit director.
Second unit captain, so you had a lot of work to do.
Yeah. We had one of the hardest shots, the motorcycle is supposed to jump up and then keep going up into the sky. Well, we have to get the beginning of it, beginning of the jump. And they used a Harley, very heavy motorcycle.
Yes.
And we built a ramp so that we'd just go up the ramp and leave as if it had gone, starting to go into the sky. The first time we had this Harley come up, it crushed the ramp. And we had to keep rebuilding ramps so they're heavy enough to hold him so we could get the shot.
So it sounds like you're not only the second unit you're in charge of shooting it, you got to come up with the ideas and make it work. Right?
Yeah.
This is what the script requires. Make it work, right?
And we had another scene where he walks out on walks out on
The main actor, the main story.
yeah, he walks out on the side of the mountain, and it's just standing there in midair.
Right.
We had to put plexiglass out, and he had to walk on this plexiglass. But we had to be safe, so we had to put a piano wire on him
Right.
up high on a little crane, so that when he went out there, if he did accidentally fall, we could jerk him back up. But that film was fun to make.
Yeah. The reason I ask is just I'm a big fan of this one film called Ricou Browning. The main star of the kid is in that film. And so
Right.
there's a little bit of a connection there. Also, what about did you actually? This is pretty recent. Boardwalk Empire. Did you do some?
No, that was my son.
Oh, your son. Okay.
Yeah, my son Ricky is in the film business, and he has probably done more films and more commercials than I ever thought about doing. So he's doing real well.
Wow, that's great. That's great.
If you look him up, he's Ricou Browning Jr.
Junior. Okay. But they had, I think they mistakenly had Boardwalk Empire on one of
Yeah,
their
they
pages.
messed it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got about 5 minutes to go, so questions? Yes, go ahead.
Someone who is considered one of the original Universal monsters, did you have much interaction or opportunities to meet like Lon Chaney and Bela Lugosi and?
No, they were all dead. They were all dead.
You're the last of the classics.
Well, so far.
Yeah.
It's nice to be alive.
Well, Lon Chaney Jr. He lived around. Lon Chaney Jr. Did you ever meet him? He was around for a while.
No, I didn't meet him.
Yeah.
No.
So
But his film, Wolfman, the one he was in, I thought was one of my best films that
That's one of his
great
favorites.
movie.
yeah, did you probably So you're watching these monster movies as a kid or a teenager. You probably never even thought you would be
No,
considered part of the group.
no.
You're part of the. I mean, you're the group, man. He's got the membership card. Other questions? Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, Millicent Patrick. There's pictures of her like putting finishing touches on the creature suit. What were your memories of her, and what was her contribution to the look and design of the creature outfit?
All I remember about her was we had a dive tank
Right.
on the back lot at Universal Studios, and they were shooting test footage of me as a creature suit, swimming, and how it looked, and how Julie looked in her white bathing suit, etc. So I was on the top deck, and I felt somebody doing something to me, and I looked down, because I had the head on. I looked down, and there's this woman painting my chest. What is she doing? And then I found out later it's who you said she was. And as far as I know, that's the only thing she ever did.
Interesting, yeah, because there's controversy about that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He didn't see much of her.
Yeah. So that's
Chris Mueller, who
Chris
was
Blues.
sent from Disney Studios, and Jack Kevan did more to design the suit that was actually used.
Because and she got fired, didn't she, by Bud?
Yeah, she got fired by Bud.
Bud Westmore fired her, I think, at some point. So there's some kind of.
Well, Bud Westmore got credit for everything. It's crazy. At that time when they're filming, the head of the makeup department was Bud Westmore, and the only person they could get credit was the head of the department. So the other people could not get credit.
You didn't even get credit on the movie.
Yeah, but now you did.
Yep.
Here he is. Thanks so much. It's an honor to be up here and to share the stage with you, Ms. Browning. I can't believe I'm actually with one of the great classic monsters here that I grew up to and I loved. So when I had a war model of the creature when I was a kid.
You're so right.